My way or the highway. The U.S.'s strategy of economic and political dominance. The United States has long been accused of adopting a my way or the highway approach in its foreign policy, particularly when it comes to countries rich in natural resources. This strategy often entails imposing directives on other nations and exploiting their natural wealth, with severe consequences for those who resist. Additionally, international organizations like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, play a crucial role in this dynamic, coercing countries into accepting loans that come with stringent conditions. The result is a predictable flow of wealth from the exploited countries to the U.S. and its allies, leaving local populations and nations with minimal benefits. This article delves into how this strategy has played out in Africa, South America, the Middle East, and Greece, with a focus on the use of U.S. sanctions as a weapon to enforce compliance. Africa. The case of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, is a quintessential example of how the U.S. and its allies have leveraged their power to control natural resources. Rich in minerals such as cobalt, copper, and diamonds, the DRC has been a focal point of international interest. Despite its wealth, the DRC remains one of the poorest countries in the world. This paradox is largely due to the influence of foreign powers and organizations like the IMF. In the late 20th century, the IMF and World Bank provided loans to the DRC, imposing strict conditions that required the country to liberalize its economy and privatize its mining sector. These reforms opened the door for multinational corporations, many of which were linked to Western interests, to dominate the mining industry. The local population saw little benefit from these activities, as profits were repatriated and the country was left with environmental degradation and social unrest. South America. Venezuela's struggle. Venezuela, with its vast oil reserves, has also faced the brunt of U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. has consistently exerted pressure on Venezuela to align with its economic and political interests. When the country resisted, particularly under the leadership of Hugo Chavez and later Nicolas Maduro, it faced economic sanctions and political isolation. U.S. sanctions have been a powerful tool in this strategy. These sanctions have targeted Venezuela's oil industry, government officials, and financial institutions, effectively crippling the country's economy. The sanctions, combined with IMF-imposed austerity measures in the past, have led to widespread social unrest and a humanitarian crisis. The sanctions' intent is clear: to force Venezuela to comply with U.S. demands or face severe economic consequences. The Middle East. Iraq's ordeal. Iraq provides a stark illustration of the consequences of non-compliance with U.S. directives. In 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq under the pretext of eliminating weapons of mass destruction. However, many analysts argue that a significant motive behind the invasion was to gain control over Iraq's vast oil reserves. Post-invasion, the IMF and World Bank were quick to offer loans to the new Iraqi government, which was under significant pressure to accept. These loans came with conditions that required the privatization of Iraq's oil industry and other key sectors. As a result, Western oil companies gained substantial control over Iraq's oil production, while the Iraqi people saw little improvement in their living conditions. The country remains mired in conflict and economic instability. U.S. sanctions have also played a role in Iraq. In the 1990s, extensive sanctions were imposed on Iraq, severely damaging its economy and infrastructure. These sanctions were lifted only after the U.S.-led invasion and the establishment of a new government that aligned with U.S. interests. Greece. The austerity crisis. Greece's experience with the IMF and the European Central Bank, ECB, highlights how these institutions can impose devastating economic policies on countries, even within Europe. During the 2008 financial crisis, Greece was hit particularly hard and required a bailout from the IMF, ECB, and European Commission, collectively known as the Troika. Yanis Varoufakis, Greece's former finance minister, has been a vocal critic of the austerity measures imposed by the Troika. According to Varoufakis, the conditions attached to the bailout loans included severe budget cuts, tax hikes, and privatizations, which led to a deep recession, skyrocketing unemployment, and widespread social distress. Varoufakis argued that these measures primarily served to repay foreign creditors while sacrificing Greece's economic stability and the welfare of its people. Varoufakis has pointed out that these austerity policies were not designed to help Greece recover, but to ensure that the country's creditors were paid back. As a result, Greece's economic sovereignty was severely compromised, and the country was left with a weakened economy and a disillusioned population. The role of sanctions. U.S. sanctions are a critical weapon in enforcing compliance with its directives. These sanctions can devastate a nation's economy, leading to shortages of essential goods, inflation, and widespread hardship. By targeting key industries, financial systems, and political leaders, sanctions aim to force countries to align with U.S. interests or face severe economic consequences. This tactic has been used effectively in Venezuela, Iraq, and other countries that have resisted U.S. demands. The role of the IMF. The International Monetary Fund plays a pivotal role in the U.S.'s strategy of economic dominance. By providing loans to countries in need, the IMF imposes conditions that often lead to the privatization of national resources and the opening of markets to foreign corporations. These corporations, frequently aligned with U.S. interests, gain control over critical industries, ensuring that profits flow back to the U.S. and its allies. Conclusion. The U.S.'s My Way or the Highway approach, supported by organizations like the IMF and enforced through sanctions, has led to significant exploitation of natural resources in Africa, South America, the Middle East, and even Europe. Countries that resist this approach face severe consequences, including economic sanctions, political isolation, and even military intervention. Meanwhile, those that comply often find themselves with little to show for their cooperation, as profits are siphoned off by multinational corporations and local populations remain impoverished. The cases of the DRC, Venezuela, Iraq, and Greece highlight the urgent need for a reevaluation of global economic policies to ensure that natural resources and economic policies benefit the countries and people to whom they rightfully belong.